For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started. About carbon dating. If so, can he briefly explain whether or not that the rate has changed over time pertaining to carbon dating, or is it consistent in the past, would you say?
I'm not an absolute expert on carbon dating, but I've studied it a fair amount, especially relative to creation issues. Carbon dating, like radioisotope dating, requires many assumptions about the past and even about the present in order to get any accurate measurements. Now, it is very useful at times to get approximate ideas of time from carbon dating. But of course, it has a short half-life of only about, 5,000 years or something. Carbon 14 half-life, which is the radioactive isotope of carbon 12. So the question was, how is it related? Carbon dating, as most people do not understand, can only be used in samples that have organic material in them. Number one, you can't date an igneous rock, a quartz rock, a fossil that's completely petrified. It has to be a sample that has organic material in it. Number one, and then it cannot be any older, in theory, than about 80 to 100,000 years, depending on the type of equipment that you're using to measure the radioisotope proportions in it. Some equipment is more accurate than others, and on the outside, anything that is over 100,000 years using the best AMS equipment should not show any radiocarbon in it. But indeed, we do find carbon 14 in samples of so-called tens of millions to hundreds of millions of years old, which is totally, anathema to what you would expect from carbon dating. So there's something wrong with these samples when they come up with find these fossils and such that are claimed to be in the geologic record in the tens of millions of years old, when it still contains carbon 14. It's totally incongruent with the data. They cannot be that old.
Standing, Dr. Baumgartner has written a paper, that paper on the carbon 14 and diamonds and coal and whatever. And there's a section in that report where he talks about the rate, whether the rate of carbon 14, the decay has actually changed over time. Now, I can't remember, it's been a while since I've read that section, so I don't want to say anything in case I get it wrong, but if you care to download that particular report, or I can provide it in the comment section if you leave a comment there, you can read it yourself and see what Dr. Baumgartner has to say about that particular question.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just the half-life of carbon 14 in question. It's how fast is it being produced in the atmosphere. And
Yep.
One of the assumptions is that it's been produced at a particular rate in the atmosphere for, thousands and millions of years constantly. But we that's a far stretch, because different atmospheric effects, including the effects of the atomic bomb blasts experimentations that we did in the 1940s and 50s, have affected the atmosphere. And so we know that there are various effects on what the rate of carbon-14 being produced in the atmosphere, and that leads to uncertainties and inaccuracies.
They call that the equilibrium problem. Even Libby, the inventor of the carbon-14 method, actually realized that if the Earth was billions of years old, there was a problem.
Yeah.
And even with the fact that we know the magnetic field is decaying, which essentially limits the age of the Earth as well, with a stronger magnetic field in the past, in the pre-flood world, that would also affect cosmic ray bombardment in the, I guess, production of C14 as well. So
absolutely. And we know the magnetic field is decreasing. We've been measuring it for over 100 years. We know we have a pretty good handle mathematically on the decay rate, and that would definitely affect the fact that carbon-14 would not be produced in the upper atmosphere at the same rate for eons of time.
right, great point. So as always with the uniformitarian, a lot of assumptions are at play when it comes to
the main thing is that it would be difficult to get an exact date using carbon-14. You could get an estimate, an approximate date, but certainly when you find carbon-14 in samples that are purported to be in the tens of millions of years old, there's definitely that is incongruous with the idea of an old Earth, and especially when you find it in diamonds. That's a whole discussion in itself. We found carbon-14 in diamonds, and the crystallography of diamonds is such that it is the most compact atomic structure that we know of on the Earth, and nothing can penetrate inside of it or outside of it, nothing in the natural. So there's no way to get carbon-14 contamination inside a diamond crystal. And yet we find carbon-14 in there.
It's funny because they want to resort to that rescue device of contamination. And as you so perfectly pointed out, Sal, you've got C14 in diamonds, which are essentially the hardest substance on Earth. So they should be resistant to contamination. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't they?
They're totally resistant to contamination. We don't know how to get anything inside of a diamond, that I know of.
Right.
Because the carbon structure is a tetrahedron, a compact tetrahedral structure, which is known to chemistry and is extremely, dense, and it doesn't fit anything else in there. Minerals that are contaminated because the structure is looser, you might say, and it will accommodate other atoms of other elements inside the structure to some extent, to a limited extent. But you can't squeeze anything else into a diamond.
Yeah, because that rescue device doesn't work too well, Sal. They're now throwing their own scientists under the bus and suggesting that it's laboratory background contamination, but they don't seem to realize that the results, even the rate results that were achieved, had that background contamination subtracted.
They checked all
subtracted from the results. So even when it was subtracted, they had measurable quantities of carbon-14.
I find it funny. Before I move on to the next question, I guess this question, the topic of dating methods could be an entire show in and of itself. But I find it funny when they want to bring these arguments up, C14, radioisotope dating, when in fact it that very line of evidence limits the age of the Earth, as Sal was pointing out. C14 in diamonds, in fossilized wood, all of these things that are dated according to the evolutionists tens of millions of years old. And you can get into helium and zircon crystals, and we could talk all day about those lines of evidence that they think are irrefutable confirmation of an old Earth actually limits the age of the Earth. So
do we have time for me to bring up my slide of the AMS form that you submit for radiocarbon dating?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll do that. It's very instructive, being that
Sure.
we're on that subject matter. Let's see, I'll share my screen, right?
Yep. Yep, there we go. I just added it to the stream, Sal. Oh.
Okay, now I bring up my PowerPoint.
Actually, I think you just
Stopped. Yeah.
I think you just stopped it. If you want to click it one more time, Sal, it was up there. We could see it. If you want to click it one more time.
Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Not right now. I think you'll have to click it again.
You need to share your screen again, Sal, because you stopped it earlier.
Okay. Share the screen. Okay.
Click on this. Click on the screen again, and then Donnie will do the rest.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Okay, we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay. Okay, can you see this?
Yep.
This is the picture in this corner here, the image of the sample submission that you would submit. In this case, it's the Arizona State AMS facility. That's the atomic mass spectrometer for radioisotope dating. And in this down here on the actual submission form, I don't know if you could read it. If it's large enough, I'll read it for you. It says expected age, and please provide other information. So right on the form, as you're giving that to them to date a radioisotope sample, they're asking you for the expected age. Now, why would they ask you for the expected age if it's a absolute dating method? They shouldn't need any input from you to date the sample. So this is the way the sample is dated. You see, they assume the age of the sample based on the evolutionary suppositions of presuppositions that you have of the sample, and then they send it to a lab, okay, for isotopic dating, okay, and then they compare the isotope results from the lab with the assumed age up here. They compare the lab results with the assumed age, and then they look to see if they agree. Now, if they agree, they'll publish it. But if they don't agree, they go all around the chain again and start all over again, manipulating the sample or the data or having an excuse as to why they did not agree. This is not real science, because they shouldn't be asking you for the expected age in the first place. They do that in order to compare their results with what you're expecting and deciding whether they're going to publish it or not. Isn't that quite something?
That's very amazing. It's
very
amazing.
disingenuous.
Yes, very disingenuous.
What you're not told, right here, what you are not told is that any published dates must agree with the initial assumptions of the sample's evolutionary position in the geologic record. If it doesn't agree, they have a fancy name for that. It's called discordant,
Discordant.
and
Yeah,
it's thrown in
discordant.
the circular file.
Yeah.
Right there is a document we all need to screen share every time an evolutionist brings up that topic, because essentially they're assuming the evolutionary position to prove evolution, to prove deep time. Assume deep time
Exactly.
to prove deep time. Circular.
Can I add that form you fill out? It's not just for carbon-14 or the AMS. It's pretty much for any dating method.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a general form for, radioisotope dating. And this is not just the form. I mean, this form is from the university in Tucson. But most all the labs, from what I understand, have a very similar form. They require you to submit the expected age.
Yeah, correct.
That's
Now,
very good.
So before SFT sort of finalizes the stream, and now that you're an expert at sharing your information, I'd like to take you up on that offer of you coming back to do another presentation on stratification.
Yeah, I do have another presentation on the other end. Like one of the audiences asked, what about the deposition? This presentation was on the erosion, but what about all the units that are claimed to be millions of years from deposition? I will show you that these units are totally incongruous with what we see on the surface of the Earth today. In other words, the current state of situations, the present is not the key to the past.
Right. Yeah, no, it would be an honor to have you on again for that presentation, Sal.